Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Steven Nalls, a professional chef, regenerative farmer, and an Escoffier Chef Instructor right here in Boulder, Colorado. After working in the hospitality industry for 15 years in Texas, California, Hawaii, Steven became a chef instructor at Escoffier, where he teaches the Farm to Table Experience course. In 2016, he and his wife bought an 80-acre farm to begin a homestead so that their three daughters could grow up in a pastoral environment and lifestyle. And our Escoffier community is very happy that he did. Join me today as I chat with Chef Steven about the Three Sisters Farm and Ranch and the impact regenerative agriculture is having on our society. And there he is. Good morning, Chef. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, Chef. Good to see you again.
You look good. You look good. That virtual background even looks real. We know it's real, right? But you're not. Tell people you're not in the barn right now, though.
I don't have good internet in the barn, so it's just a background.
People will realize pretty quickly that we've met. And, first and foremost, I'm super excited about this chat today. And I mean this with all sincerity and appreciation. You've been that solid background of our program here in Boulder at Escoffier for over a decade now. Our Farm to Table class is the culmination of our program and the time our students most look forward to. You're legendary. You're there with the students when they really, really shine. You're leading the charge, and everyone kind of sees you, especially me, as an individual that truly walks the talk, right? And so we're super, super thankful for you. Look forward to hearing, in your words, about what's important to you. Three Sisters Farm and Ranch. We'll let you talk about the beautiful name and the personal piece there. It's a beautiful location. Try to set the tone here on Colorado's Front Range. I've had the good fortune of spending some time there with you and your family, both sides of your family, your wife's parents as well. And as have some of our students who you've graciously hosted for some informative tours and some great food. And what I love most about your approach, Chef, and your style is that you, I think, truly, truly are genuinely interested in where our food comes from. How important is that to you?
It's super important and a driving force in what I'm doing these days. When I was in culinary school back in the good old days, it wasn't really talked about much, and I didn't really, it came off a truck, and that's one of the things of teaching at Escoffier that's really driven me to dive deeper into that understanding and learning about how it can affect people, environment, flavors. It's so tied into so many aspects of what we do. So instead of me continuing in the culinary field on the back end, I really wanted to get towards the front end of food and how does it get to the plate and what goes into that and why and is it better, is it not? These are all things I'm trying to explore and learn.
Did that make you a better instructor? Or I've always thought that while people are educating themselves, whether it's through practical applications or school, that they're better teachers, right? They're sharing as they're learning. Did you find when you made that commitment, several years ago with your wife to grab this land and do something special with it, and we'll get to that in a minute, that all of a sudden you were even a better teacher than you were the day before?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just teaching and cooking as well. I think
Oh, good
it,
point. Yeah.
it gave me a lot of reference points on food and flavors, which I can then share with my students. And then the real world experience really helps kind of set the tone and let them know I'm not just regurgitating information to them, that these are things that I've lived and seen and done. And I think one of the things I try to stress to my students is just grow something because it'll make you a better cook. But then all the parallels of the culinary arts and the farming arts are very similar, and that learning curve is similar. So, um, kind of learning from failures and successes has really helped me articulate that to the students as well.
Yeah. So it's a super, super important point. I'm going to going to dive in a little bit. Three Sisters Farm and Ranch. You know, you have three daughters, three beautiful daughters. And on a previous podcast, this just kind of popped into my head. We were talking about how important it is to demonstrate to your children sort of, you know, habits that you want them to have. You can't be behind your computer yelling at your kids to get off of Fortnite, right? you got you got to walk the walk, talk the talk. So, same thing with food, right? So if you're putting fresh vegetables from the garden or fresh vegetables from wherever and produce and other proteins, you know, that you know where they came from, you're putting them on the table. What was that part of the whole sort of kind of thought process is like, let's do this for us, but let's really do this for our daughters, for our family.
Absolutely. That was one of the beginning driving forces. When before we had the farm, we were living in town as most people do, and I've always had a small garden. And the transition from gardening to farming is quite bigger than you might think. But I think that first memory of my daughter taking that cherry tomato off the vine and seeing her eyes light up, and then just keep going back for more, and knowing that when they see where it's coming from and they taste it, they'll just naturally have a healthier diet in most cases. And you know, I take that loss of yield with pride when they're out there helping me harvest. They could fill themselves up with their body weight of food with no complaints from me.
That's a
And
cost of
just
doing business, buddy. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And just kind of subconsciously, you know, teaching them how those delicious things are good for you without having to force them to clean their plate or try something new. When they kind of see it start from seed, especially if they planted the seed and they see it start to go to fruition, they got some stock in the game type of scenario, and they're going to go for it a lot easier. And that was a big driving force to let them know how food is such a big impact, not just in my life as a chef, but really everyone's life. It plays such an important role.
I love that visual. So three girls on the farm with you, your wife, your parents are on the farm as well. When you put the spread out, I'm curious. I grew up in a family where, you know, what was in front of you is what you were going to eat that night. And there was no going to the refrigerator. And it's different for us now, right? We've got the farm table in the kitchen and there's a lot of variety on the table every night. And we're cool with that, right? The kids are sort of moving over from peppers to, you know, whatever we have on the table. Um, do you is that something that is sort of natural, organic, serendipitous? It just sort of happens that if you allow your daughters, your family, the choices, they tend to make choices, you know, hopefully that are, you know, healthy and good for them.
Yeah, if everything's going right, that's what we're hoping for. Yeah, they still love their snacks and sweets, but just seeing them really go for those healthy things and say at 2 years old, I love broccoli is a pretty
It's
important
huge.
time
Yeah.
frame. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course, like all kids, that changes as they age and it goes in waves. But it really helps them to eat better if they help plan the meal and help harvest the meal. That really goes a long way.
Yeah, that's great. Same with students. Same with students. So let's talk about you for a little bit. Some backstory. While attending, I believe a bachelor's program in engineering, mechanical engineering at Texas A&M, you realized, in your words, you didn't have a passion for the thermodynamics of an I-beam, but you love the thermodynamics of a saute pan. Sort of kidding, but kind of not, right? Can we start at the beginning? So first, what was it about mechanical engineering? Because we're going to tie all this together that you were fascinated by.
Yeah, so I really wanted to test and develop backpacking equipment. I'm an Eagle Scout. The
Oh, wow.
outdoors has always been a big part of my life, and I was always cooking as I was going to school as well, in front of the house first, and I moved into the kitchen once I realized I really wanted to go down that career path during school. Um, but you know, I had the aptitudes for it. I did some testing and it said I'd be good at that. My mom's an engineer. Texas A&M in my home state is a pretty proud engineering school. And I thought that was my first step into my future, right? Like most people, you got to go on that track, school, and then get that job and make that into a career. And I pretty quickly realized that I'm not really a desk kind of person, and being in the kitchens, I caught a love for the fire and the knife and the lifestyle and the variety that it provides. So I decided to hang up my engineering drafting board hat and all that good stuff, and move out to California to go to culinary school to pursue that passion.
How was it? I know that you worked in kitchens at a young age, and you were in the industry for what seems like a career, right? A long time, 15 years. What was it like growing up in Texas? Was food a big part of the family table and your lifestyle? Did that kind of catch you early on?
Yeah, I think it did. It did catch me early on. My mom's turned into a great cook over time. She's been the historical cook of the family, and she's not afraid to experiment, try new things. She has a great love of food as well. So some of that's coming from there. And having the family dinner together was always an important mainstay of what we were doing. And she's a country girl from West Texas, so having beef tongue on the table was not weird. But her best friend was Hawaiian, so getting octopus in the freezer section at the grocery store and cooking that up on a weekend was not an unusual thing as well. So lots of experimentation. She was a gardener as well, so I had an early love of that tomato off the vine, the true tomato off the vine, not the one at the grocery store on the vine. And pretty early on knew that there was a difference from homegrown to store bought. But it didn't really set until later on in life. But food always played an important role. And then finally, when I got my driver's license, my mom said, "Well, you're going to need to get a job if you want to pay for the gas." So I went the easiest route I could and just walked into a Burger King and applied. And then, even though it's not glamorous working in a fast food restaurant, I really started to get the bug for the kitchen industry, and then started waiting tables at country clubs and bartending and things like that. And just to make money on the side, not really ever thinking of that as a career. Just it was the most accessible, easy job I got, and it got me good, and I don't think I'll ever leave it.
You're hooked, yeah. Did you,
Yeah,
similar to me, I went to the University of Oregon and then went to culinary school, but grew up obviously in a more, food centric family with a master pastry chef as a dad and family bakery and all that stuff. So you went to culinary school after A&M, right?
correct.
How
Yeah.
was these are great shares for our students and our listening audience, right? So did you get all of the wiggles out at A&M so that when you went to culinary school, you were like hyper focused and just that's the way it was for me.
No, that's exactly how it worked for me. I was not making the best choices. I was spending more time on my social life than my education. And I was always a really great student, honor rolls, all those things going through high school. Everything came easy to me. And university is not something you just walk in and ace the test. So bad choices. And then I just needed to make a big change decision, and I knew that culinary school was really the way to go. So I decided to go as far away as I could to get away from the choices I was making. And I really dove head first, and
Into Los
perfect.
Angeles, right?
Yeah, and into Pasadena. And
Yeah, yeah.
it was a really great learning experience, really great ingredients, great instructors, great opportunities of work around to be able to work while going to school. A lot of eye-opening food out there. The difference in cuisine from West Texas to the massive variety in Southern California is pretty massive, and to be able to go into an H Mart in that area versus the Asian section at a West Texas grocery store just blew my mind, and
Yeah, yeah.
never stopped buying things I can't pronounce and trying them out since.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So then it was pretty natural, right? You got trained and you went into the industry. We'll talk about teaching in just a minute, but any moments that really stand out, Texas, California, Hawaii. I mean, 15 years is a long time. What were some of those really kind of memorable moments when you were in the industry, just trying to figure it out?
There's a lot of memories that have imprinted on me over time, from just different styles of service, different foods, and different. I left a little piece of my heart in Hawaii. Just the environment there,
Yeah, yeah.
the freshest fish, and all that stuff really kind of blew my mind. But I think the biggest impact was the people I worked with. The diversity of people, the camaraderie that when you get in with a team and it feels like a family unit, and everything, the dance is on fire. It's a special adrenaline moment, and you never know if it's going to go the right way, but we're all going to work together to make sure we're going to get out of there alive, type of thing. I think that was my biggest impact, was just all the people we've met. I like to tell my students that you're going to work with everyone from ex-cons to ex-doctors and everything in between, and that's really the hardest part of this industry, is dealing with the people, and then the money. The cooking part's the easy part. Dealing with the humanitarian aspect of it is an important thing to master early on.
No, that's just a great statement. The idea that you went directly to the people, right? So a lot of that never changes, right? So those are the stories. So for our audience, you have this calmness about you in the kitchen, right? Students can sometimes be frantic, right? They're trying to make deadlines, and they're not as comfortable. But it's the stories. It's the sharing of how important people and your team are to you, that I really, really love. When you look back on your time in professional kitchen chef, what would be, even if your daughters wanted to do that, what would be the advice you would give as they approach the industry, entry to the industry? And then a second part of that question is, from when you were in the industry, over a decade ago to today, how much has it changed from your perspective?
Yeah. So first part of the question, advice. I think the most important advice is to get out there and do it, to make sure you love it. Going to culinary school without ever being in a kitchen and just watching Food Network is it's a pretty big difference from what they see on the front of the screen. And if you come
Yeah.
in unaware of the work, the hours, the pay, all these things, you can lose that passion pretty quickly, and just get overwhelmed by it. So I think the best advice I can give is make sure you love it, because while cooking in kitchens isn't for everyone, you can do a lot of different things in this food industry with a culinary career. It's not just cooking in restaurants. It's just probably the most upfront aspect of it. So make sure you kind of have a basic understanding of this is what you really want to do, which sometimes just takes some time to do. For me, it was realizing that I didn't want to do something else, and that this is what I really wanted to do. So
Process of elimination. Yeah,
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 it's a
yeah.
little different for everyone there.
No,
Um,
good advice. Yeah, I'm going to try to connect the dots from, teaching farm to table, here in Colorado. You started teaching, a new concept here at Escoffier, this idea of farm to table experience, and really, trying to get the students out to the, local farmers at, during their class. And then you started diving deeper into locally produced food yourself, sustainability, right? So even a learning process for you. What did you encounter? Like, take us back, 5 or 6 years. What did you encounter as a chef in this industry, discovering a new interest and a new passion, or maybe an enlightened passion? I mean, you remembered the tomatoes off the vine that you had at your family, so it was important to you already. but I'm really curious what your learning curve was like as a teacher, as someone who had been in the industry, and then you happen to just end up in a beautiful community like Boulder up to Fort Collins, where, I mean, this is kind of what we do here, right? A lot of evangelists for local sustainability in Colorado. Did you feel, did you start to teach differently? Did you start to think differently? Take us before 2016 when you actually, I remember the day, when you're like, we bought a farm, we bought a ranch,
Yeah,
and
that
then I
was
look
a
at, go ahead. Yeah.
that was a tough week, because my twins are born the same week we closed on the property,
I
and
remember, I
that's when
remember.
all the gray started
Yeah.
coming in. But yeah, almost 12 years ago, I started teaching here at Escoffier. So we were just getting started up, and we were building the program, and I really had just a very basic understanding of what we were trying to do, and getting out there and being on farm with students, learning with the students is really where it all started for me. um, just having a basic understanding of our food system and learning more so I could teach others, which is one of the best things about teaching at a culinary school is how much you learn as the instructor, not just the students. Really kind of set the tone for where I eventually desired to go to. Getting out there, seeing these systems that are being put into place to create, number one, delicious food, and then number two, having a positive environmental and socioeconomic impact, and all these things that I really didn't fully see were tied to our food system. Local jobs, environmental standards, and how soil microbes can develop flavor. I took a nutrition class in culinary school, but I never made that connection of nutrition and delicious, and how they in I've not found another example otherwise, but if it is supremely delicious, it likely has more nutrition in it as well. And how the soil and the water and the terroir play a role in building that vegetable or that animal in that scenario. It really opened my eyes, and that's when I decided that I need to do this deep dive. I expanded my garden in the backyard. We got some city chickens, which I think are the kind of gateway drug of future farmers. Is starting with a small little herd of back or flock of backyard chickens, and just tasting that egg difference, and seeing their actions, and knowing how that role can play delicious, and also all these other standards that can come along with that. The the learning curve is steep, and still learning quite a bit. I still don't consider myself a true farmer yet. I'm a amateur farmer, moving towards the goal of becoming a professional.
Well, I think people are going to see really quickly that you're super, super humble, and I'm proud to say, even though I self-identify and the family does as primarily plant-based, I look forward to bringing, you know, eggs from your farm every week, bringing them home, and they are different. And we had the good fortune of at least for 1 week raising one of your new chicks, which was the highlight of my kids' summer, to be perfectly honest. But I want to emphasize too, I'm so proud to have you as a guest and to have you here with Escoffier for over a decade. What people don't realize is, you've got this farm and it's not next door. You're an hour away both ways. You get up early, you take care of what you need to on the farm, you come, you teach for 6 to 8 hours, and then you head on back. It's an amazing commitment, and it's not lost on me or anyone at Escoffier. So I want to make sure that you know that. And because I've had the good pleasure of touring the farm a couple of times, the ranch with you, I'd love it. This is the hard part because it's good. You're a storyteller, right? I'd love it if you could kind of maybe discuss the origin of the farm, more of the particulars, how your folks got involved, and some of your key initiatives. I love hearing about just the irrigation, and I know that you've got heritage breeds, you've got Highland cattle, Icelandic sheep, goats, I think who you referred to as weed eaters, and alpacas, who are your protectors, and your breast chickens, your turkeys, your egg chickens, and of course all of the vegetable production and the bees, right? Could you just take us on a little, sort of imaginary tour of the farm?
Sure, sure. There's a lot to unpack there, so pause me if we need to. So in about 2014, I approached my wife about potentially selling our home and buying a piece of property. And it took us about 2 years to find this piece of property. And unfortunately, it was further away from school. I was driving from Fort Collins, which was about an hour, and now I'm about an hour and a half away from the school. And don't ever do that math when you're commuting. I've spent over 4 months in the car in the 12 years I've been here. But that being said, that kind of rural lifestyle and learning about our food was something that she was willing to support me in. And so we just kind of bit the bullet. And it took us a while to find a property that we could afford, and in an area that we wanted to live in, that had the right zoning for doing what we wanted to do, and getting a water right as well, which is it's not an easy or cheap thing to do that in the West. The water right laws are challenging, to say the least. So we finally got lucky enough and got that little package where we got our share of water and some acreage with a house that we could live on. And we could not do that without the support of our family, and some good choices driven by my wife earlier on in our marriage, helped us get there. And the property was poorly managed before we got there. It was overgrazed. The Some issues with the land were there, but I was willing to take on that challenge, and try to start rebuilding all of that. And my beginning approach. Well, let's start with the name, right? So we had twins. That week we bought the house, and that made three daughters. So in my education aspects, learning about Native American agriculture techniques, the Three Sisters farm of agriculture, companion planting agriculture, just seemed to kind of fit with our scenario we had going on. And I was imagining 12, 15 years down the road, my three daughters being my sales team at the farmers market, and how the three daughters at the Three Sisters farm stand would be banging marketing strategy. So that was kind of the etymology and the beginnings of the name, came about. And then I started thinking about, well, what do we want to grow? And the answer was everything, which is not something you should ever try to do, is everything all at once. But just kind of threw everything at the wall to see what sticks, to see what we could do. I was throwing different taglines around, kind of the whole diet farm, or feeding people with heritage breeds and old seeds and things like that, trying to develop our kind of mantra, our ethics, our business strategy. So I knew doing the animals was something that was going to be a long learning curve, and it was going to take some time to get numbers up to a point to where I could use them. And protein being one of the more contentious sustainable products out there, I really wanted to see, number one, could I do it? Number two, is it worth it, flavor wise, cost wise? And is it good for all the kind of core tenets that we were trying to represent? So we first started off with three Scottish Highland heifers, from a farm up in the mountains of Colorado. And they were about a year old, and we raised them up until they were breeding age, about 2 years on average. And we started doing some artificial insemination, learning that process as well, to develop our livestock. Once I knew I could keep more than chickens alive, and happy and healthy, we moved on to some sheep. And I was looking for a multi-purpose breed, number one. Well, number one, I was looking for the tastiest breed, but then I also wanted a multi-purpose breed. So we settled on Icelandic sheep, which is a very old heritage breed, with, I'm going to argue, biased, obviously, some of the best tasting lamb I've ever had. But they're also a highly prized wool sheep and a good dairy sheep as well. Great butterfat content in their milk. And being kind of a homestead first, moving towards a sustainable farm later, we want to utilize the whole animal and respect all that. So learning how to shear and use wool, and even sending my mom off to a spinning class to learn how to do natural dyeing and spinning on that, and tanning our own hides has been an interesting experiment. A little bit of milking in there, but mostly for meat and grazing. Of course, we always had our chickens. We just increased our heritage breed egg layers for color diversity, also for hardiness in our harsh kind of winter climates up here. And as I was trying to develop a meat bird program, trying to stay away from our commercial Cornish cross breeds, started researching what's the tastiest breed of chicken out there. So of course, as a chef, I'd always heard of the breast chicken out of France, and was super interested in that. So I wanted to get into that. So spent $30 on a dozen fertilized eggs that came in the mail, and hatched those out ourselves to start out our own breasts, American breasts. They're protected, DOC protected, so I can't call them breasts. They're
Sure. Yeah.
American breast chickens. And the first time I ate that, just night and day difference in structure, flavor, even the color of the meat. The leg meat on those is almost purple like duck legs. It's a super flavorful, a little bit more toothsome. It doesn't have that massive breast. They're very active foragers. Um, all along, I'm growing vegetables as well, trying to learn our soil conditions, our weathering patterns, trying to figure out what I need to know to set up processes so that we can do that. And then my parents came into the play. They retired early and wanted to come spend more time with their grandparents. So they sold their house in town. We sold them very cheaply, 5 acres of the property. They lived in an RV on site for 2 years while they built a house out there, and they've really been an interest. It's super important kind of safety net for us, childcare and just extra help on the farm. And it's been a big blessing to have their support and their time out there as well. So trying to grow a little bit of everything, learning the processes and see what works and what doesn't work, what's going to be viable, what's not viable, what's amazing. I'm going to keep doing that. What doesn't work so well? Well, do I need to stop doing that, or do I need to change up how I approach it? And that's kind of the stages we're in now. We're getting to a production point to where I can start a CSA model in a farmer's market in a hopefully next season, and do that with a more refined product as opposed to going through all the learning curves. Not done learning, but I think I'm to a point where we can make it happen now. So the whole ultimate goal was, we're not going to focus on one thing. We're going to create what a community needs, my family being the beginning community, what we need to thrive and survive, and then what works really well that we can share and educate with our community to create a good local food system that produces delicious food, but also ethical food that has some integrity to it, was really the major goal. Future goal will be to add some small grain production in there long term, so that we really truly are kind of a whole diet farm where people can get everything they need.
Can I jump in right there? That you mentioned CSA, community supported agriculture. Can you expand on that just a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, it's a more and more popular part of getting your local food system. So, in a community supported agriculture system model, there's a lot of variations to it, but basically it's kind of like a buyer's club. You
Okay.
pay the farmer at the beginning of the season a certain fee for a certain amount of products throughout the year. And it really helps support the farmer when they need it most, as opposed to a commercial farmer where I go get my business loan to buy seeds, pay wages, maintain my equipment, plant, water, and then hopefully harvest and sell for a profit at the end of the year. I didn't want to risk all that, because I live on this farm. I can't lose the house that my kids are in. So going to a system where we're supporting our farmers by giving them that money up front and trusting that they're going to provide me with nutritious, delicious food throughout the season is a really great model. And there's a lot of variations in that. A lot of online modalities are coming into play these days. But it's really all about the community supporting the farmer and the farmer supporting that community to create that local food system that's a little bit more resistant to market challenges out there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think we're kind of talking about this, but could you talk a little bit deeper about regenerative art, agriculture? Kind of maybe define it a little bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords out there that are getting a little bit hard to define. But in my own words, regenerative agriculture is a style of agriculture that's not depleting resources. It's actually maintaining, or even better, regenerating more resources, sequestering carbon through proper rotation, animal grazing practices, and rotations of crops and minimal till practices can help actually become carbon neutral or even carbon negative as opposed to a carbon positive operation. And having these kind of more natural systems in place instead of using petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides. We're going to let the guinea fowl eat some of the insects as opposed to spraying them with pesticides. We're going to use compost and microbes and inoculants of microbes and bacteria to help create healthier soil. Just really kind of paying respect to what nature has given us, and using nature as a guide as opposed to the industrial techniques that have caused the Dust Bowl, caused desertification around the world, rainforest falling out. I want to plant more trees instead of remove trees for crops type of scenario. So kind of following nature's path is how I would loosely define regenerative agriculture.
Spoken like a teacher, like a true professor. Talk about the bees. What role do the bees play?
Well, they're fascinating insects. Their social structure, the way they produce this delicious elixir is just absolutely fascinating to me. Pollinating, we're having a lot of issues with pollinators and these neonicotinoid pesticides that are causing colony collapses all over, and a lot of other issues with that. So knowing that they produce honey, number one, that deliciousness really kind of drives the first decisions going along. But then all the side byproducts that come along with that, from the pollination just to the excitement of watching them kind of dive bomb their hive with these pollen sacs on them, and the flavor nuance depending on season. When the apple blossoms are blossoming, the honey has this really great apple floral scent. And then later on the year, when the alfalfa is king, you get a little bit more grassy note. And we talk a lot about consistency being king in our industry, but I also don't want to lose that terroir of food. It's not just a word for wine. That flavor change is what makes food super exciting and nuanced, which I really love. And as a cook, when you have a great product, you don't really have to do much to it to sell it. So that was the main driver, was its deliciousness, and then all the side effects of pollination and just keeping these animals, insects, being a major role in the environment. They really do a lot of different parts, and that kind of goes to all my practices. I don't try to kill all the insects that are eating my plants. I try to create habitat to where beneficial insects can provide balance, and the bees are a part of that. They're part of that ecosystem. They may not be the best pollinators, but they are the best honey makers.
I just love the respect you have for what you're creating. I was fascinated when you explained the irrigation style. Could you take a moment? I mean, it's amazing what you're 80 acres and you sort of flood it, right?
Yeah, so the ancient art of flood irrigation, it's pretty amazing what people have been doing for 10,000 plus years, how much I did not know what it takes to do that, to move massive amounts of water with a plastic tarp and a shovel is a really scary but also rewarding concept right there at the beginning. Definitely not the most sustainable way of irrigating here in Colorado. We have a lot of wind, wind and solar aspects that create a lot of evaporation, but it's definitely the cheapest to get into early on. So that's what I'm starting with now, mostly for pasture. When I'm irrigating my vegetable crops, I'm using a lot more efficient techniques of micro drip emitters and drip tape, and in some cases some overhead spray irrigation. But when it comes to getting water to 80 acres of pasture for growing great grass, which grows great meat, which creates great soil, and this kind of compounding aspect has been pretty interesting. And the amount of work that goes into it and the respect I have for the ancient agriculturalists is just super highlighted when that water is flowing through. And the joy, even though my feet are wet and muddy and my back is sore from shoveling, the joy of watching it spread, and then the next week the green starts to really shine. It's been pretty cool. And then my engineering mind comes into play as well, because the way you dig these ditches, it almost looks like you can move water uphill at times. And if you do it right, you can get some elevation out of that using the hydraulic pressures of that system. I just find it really amazing that we've been doing this for so long, and very few people, unless you're working that system, truly understand what goes into that. So the power of water when harnessed by human hands, you feel powerful yourself when you can do that. And
It's almost calming and relaxing. I could listen to you for hours, but I don't want to give off any impression whatsoever that what you're doing and what you're creating is easy. It's a lot of work. You mentioned the back and probably a lot of trial and error. Any moments of challenges that really stand out in your mind?
oh yeah, so many. And on that point, that's kind of one of my reasons for doing this as well, is to let everyone know what the true costs of food are, and then the work that goes into producing what's on your plate, so we waste less and use our resources better. But there's been many challenges along the way. It's not an uncommon saying that if you're going to have livestock, you're going to have dead stock. And that's probably one of the earliest challenges I had to mentally prepare myself, was predation, or um, the worst moments are when I made a mistake and that animal didn't make it through that scenario. But on the reverse side of that, when our first calf was born breech and we had to pull that calf, luckily my neighbor came and kind of showed me the way. But getting in there, not knowing if it was going to make it or not, and then see it take its first breath is it's a powerful moment. And in the beginning days, I would hide my harvesting of animals from my children because I thought they were too young for it. But of course, they would get, what's Daddy doing over there, and they would come and see. And now they're asking, what's the name of that steak that we're eating, and they know that meat does not come wrapped in plastic from the grocery store, from the beef tree, that it's coming from an animal. And while we put a lot of love into these, they know that they're there for a reason, and that we're going to utilize them thoroughly and well. We're going to treat them right alive, and we're going to treat them right on the plate. And I think just kind of developing that mindset of the amount of work that goes into it, and seeing that final dish and seeing them eat it and make that connection makes what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, right?
Oh, and we can sense it. So beautifully said. What a lovely story. The book needs to come out next. Um,
If I were only a good writer and had time to do the writing.
I think someone just needs to record you. I think we'll be just fine. And I don't want to get up over our skis, but any just subtle advice for someone, maybe a student who just wants to get started on their own little garden? maybe one or two or three things to really be careful about?
Absolutely. Number one, just start growing what you like, right? Don't go trying to grow artichokes if you don't even like to eat them. The time and energy it takes to produce a vegetable is worth understanding the work behind. But also, you want to reap the benefits along the way. So start with what you like to grow. If you've never put a seed in a piece of soil, I highly recommend you start by just buying some herb starts, putting them in a small pot in your kitchen window. And I tell every culinary class and student that comes through, it doesn't matter if you want to be a farmer or a grower or not, grow some herbs. Number one, they're about the price as pound as protein. They're not cheap. The flavor from a fresh herb can entirely change a dish. So it's economical, it's delicious, but it's also going to make you a better cook. You're going to learn that the seeds taste different than the leaves, taste different than the roots. The flavor's going to change as that plant gets older, and when it's young or after that first frost. All of these nuances change flavor, and that's going to make you a better cook in the long run. You're going to be able to adapt on the fly with ingredients that you're getting in by just having that basic understanding of growing something. And then from there, if you feel like you get the knack, then start expanding out. Learn some of the biggest mistakes, I think, are people not knowing that water is too little water is bad, and too much water is also bad. That was one of my first big mistakes, thinking I should just keep it wet all the time. Learning those little nuances that some plants don't like wet feet, some plants prefer those marshy conditions, and not everyone is the same, not every plant is the same. So we've got to kind of approach them from different aspects, and that wealth of knowledge is really best learned by doing it. We can get a lot of information from books and YouTube videos, and those are all great. I use all of those as well. But really getting out there and getting your hands in the soil and learning the texture, the smell of the soil can tell you nutrition and qualities of the soil that are to be good or bad for a plant. All of these things take a little practice to do, and it all starts with one pot in your windowsill. If you're in an apartment, put some pots on your patio. If you have some space, plant your favorite plants out there and eat them. Because that's, as a chef turning farmer, that's my ultimate goal: is it edible, is it delicious, is it good for everything else along the way, and then let's promote that, get more
Incre-
people out there doing it.
Absolutely incredible advice. Start with what you like, start with herbs, slow expansion. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. You know, Steven, chef, you've been described in a few different ways. What I hear the most is you have a willingness and eagerness to try new things. Clearly, you're calm and confident. You're personable and professional. And I sense what's most important to you is being a great father, a great husband, a prolific teacher, which you are, and a damn good rancher. I'm sensing those all make the podium, and it's really an honor to have you. We're not done with you yet, though. I think you know the name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What is, in your household, the ultimate dish?
We just had grass-fed ribeye the other day from our beef. So the ultimate dish in my house is the one that is 90+% from our farm. So that's going to change weekly, seasonally, and what our tastes are going for. So it's perfectly cooked protein, vegetable, all the components. And it even gets better when it's a part of the plant or animal that people don't eat most often. So making a sauerkraut with the broccoli leaves as opposed to just holding the stems, that's what really gets me excited. Got a fridge full of ferments going on. So once we can get all those little components on a plate and it makes sense and the kids eat it all, then that's the ultimate dish in my house.
And that is an amazing ultimate dish, seasonal, local, because it's right outside your door and it's cooked well.
Yeah, if I
Absolutely.
only had a salt mine and a black pepper tree, we'd
You'd be
be
good.
almost 100%.
Chef, thanks so much for spending some time. Ironically, I'll see you in a minute, but thanks for all you do. What a great 45 minutes just hanging with you. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Chef. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.